You've had a listen to the clean, point that thing somewhere else. Hopefully it didn't go off in your face.
Good God.
What do you think of it all?
I think I could have gone without that. Howdy, folks out there. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. I'm Andy. The striped shirt gentleman over there is John. And we are here to check out some new music. Well, new to me. Perhaps you guys are familiar with this. I know John is. But it will be new to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing what and who it is, or who and what it is. John, what do you have in store for me today, my friend?
Well, it's a band with a classic name, The Clean.
The Clean. Okay, yeah. I at this point, I think I had to have heard all of the bands that are the and something, because geez Louise, man, there's so many of them.
Oh, I've got a few more of my sleeve, I'm telling you.
Okay, great, great. Well, The Clean. What's the track title?
Point to that thing somewhere else.
Hmm. This is interesting. We just did Nick Cave, and there was all this. We talked extensively about having that thing, and here we are yet again. Okay,
I don't think it's the same thing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Interesting. Now I'm really worried. Okay, cool. Well, I will give this thing a listen, and then come back and let you know what I make of it. That was a really interesting beginning because it was like it was almost like this musical primordial ooze. There's dissonance and cymbals happening here and there, splashing, but nothing had really taken a shape yet. It all had life to it, but what it would be, it's like the single-celled organism on the evolutionary chain, where we're so it's life, but what will it become? And then it starts to piece itself together. You get this like really insistent strumming. Everything kind of takes shape, and now this guitar almost has this like locust swarm type sound to it, which probably sounds horrifying, but from an audio standpoint sounds really cool, of all of this like coming together, and creating this just a solid wall of noise, which is pleasant to my ears. In whatever that was, the verse, I literally caught nothing but "Don't point that thing at me," which is as close to the title as you're going to get, I suppose, at least this far into it. But yeah, man, it's very lo-fi kind of sounding vocals. It doesn't sound bad, but it's not discernible to me. Like, I can't make out what he's saying, save for that one line.
All around, up and down to speak for its sound.
back, it sounds almost like this. It sounds like in the distance, a bull elephant is trumpeting into a very large couch cushion. I have no idea what that sound is. There was also some really interesting, more melodic strumming. It had a little variance to it than just that straight fuzzed rhythm that was being played. Yeah, this is definitely has like this thick haze of fuzzy music all around it that you kind of have to wade through to find these little bits of like variance that they're doing peppering in here and there. It's just what I'm picking up on. Ooh, crunchy. Guitars are like their own frequency of sound. That's how like thick they are. And just like ever present. Don't they don't go anywhere. They stay. They might do slightly different things here and there, but it's just they are inevitable in this track. I love the switch of the strum patterns. Wow. Mm. No, I really, really enjoyed that. Those, just all that sound, and all that thick texture to the music. was super, super enjoyable. I loved the, sort of, I said it, I don't know if the mic picked it up or not, but there's just sort of like the patterns on the strumming patterns on the guitar, and their little bits of like changing here and there made it really enjoyable as well. Um, Good. I mean, I shouldn't take anything away from the other instruments or whatever. They all sounded really good, but man, those guitars really stood out to me. Um, yeah, the vocals I didn't catch much of. They didn't do anything for me, but they didn't take anything away either, which is always a good thing. And his sort of like pitch kind of fit this kind of wonky, nerdy type kind of sound that's going on in this, which I'm a sucker for anyway. So it fit, you know what I mean? It just didn't like it wasn't something where I was like, I have to make a note of this either because it's so good or it's so bad. No. And also that last portion of the song that just kind of wrote out musically, probably my favorite bit of the song. Probably, I would imagine a lot of people's favorite bit of the song. Um, f- Felt like it flew by, but it also feels like a part that could have gone on forever. You know what I mean? So if this was a 7-minute song where they just toyed with that bit, um, for another, minute and a half, 2 minutes or whatever, I wouldn't have complained about it at all. Because it was for me, it was such a sound that was so easy to just kind of like get lost in, um, and just kind of let wash over you. So yeah, this was a really cool song. An interesting one at that. I wonder what they would kind of consider themselves from like a genre standpoint, because there was like, I don't know, shoegazy and lo-fi aspects to this song. But yeah, whatever they call themselves aside from the clean, it doesn't really matter. This was a really good tune. I enjoyed listening to this. So I've been flying blind this whole time, know nothing about these characters. So hopefully John can tell me more about them and the song. Back on the other side.
Pan Galactic Goggle Blaster. He's back. So you've had a listen to the clean. Point that thing somewhere else. Hopefully it didn't go off in your face.
Good God.
What do you think of it all?
I think I could have gone without that. So things kick off, and there's like this few interesting seconds of dissonance amongst some kind of offbeat, kind of splashy cymbal work. Um, and it's almost like this, for me, it was like experiencing music that it was like sort of in its primordial stage, this one-celled ooze that has yet to fully form into whatever it will evolve to. So it was kind of cool to see that that was their approach to starting the song. It was actually kind of cool and neat to think of it like that, and to see them it like take form from there. And it does so in the way of these really insistent strums on the guitar that are fortified by some really quick hi-hat snare beat work, to keep pace with that strum pattern. Um, Emerging from that is this really interesting and fuzzy guitar that it's just like it's close to melody, but it's not like your textbook melody, but there's melodic elements behind all of that tough exterior and rough texture, because it quickly we are in a pea soup of a dish here. It is thick, all of it. So I'm wading through that to pick up on these really interesting little bits of variance and sound, bits that I wouldn't otherwise, or just at a quick glance or listen, been able to pick up. So yeah, I really love this interesting fuzzy work that's happening throughout all of this. That's this fucking juggernaut of a rhythm section. Uh, and shortly after that, we get treated to some very lo-fi sounding vocals, the lyrics of which I'm not catching much of at all. Which I quickly threw in the towel after that. I think the only thing I picked up was the closest thing to a title I think they offered. or reference to the title that I think they offered, which was "Don't point that thing at me," which is pretty close to "Point that thing somewhere else." It's the same sentiment. So luckily for me, they were pretty short, these verses or these
Yeah.
stanzas of lyrics. So it made forgetting about them or, fussing over them, a non-factor for me. And the guitars are guitar is the age-old question.
Um, one guitarist, I don't know if they double tracked it or not.
Okay, that's impressive because it felt like there was all the guitar in this. Like there was so much sound coming from the tune that I for sure thought we were dealing with two guitars getting into this. The sound is thick, but there are these really interesting bits I keep catching. Like at one point around the 135 mark, I think I hear what sounds like the guitar doing its best impression of a very distant bull elephant trumpeting into a very large cushion. And on top of that, before that even kicks off, when the guitar first sort of enters the fray, it has almost this swarm of locust buzz to it,
Yeah.
that's kind of going on, which is all, fuck actual swarms of locusts. I'm good on that. But when it comes to like this weird way of writing a rock song, give me all of the swarms of locusts because this sounded really cool. And I loved how they were able to build these sounds that were akin to something other than your first thought when you're thinking of the instrument themselves. Like I heard the guitar, but didn't think that's a classic guitar part. I heard that sounds like an elephant blowing into a pillow. So that's pretty cool and impressive. I like that. The guitar is almost its own frequency of sound that go completely unmitigated and yet have this wavering quality to them as well. So they don't stop or anything like that, but they sort of like a flow chart that is never ending.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, hard to explain, to be honest with you, even from like a musician's perspective, like to how to describe what that sound is. It's fucking inevitable is one way to describe it because it's ever present. Um,
But
as
sorry,
a,
sorry, Andy, can I just interrupt? There's actually two sort of ways of describing it. I think commonly people call it drone guitar.
yeah,
Um, but if you were familiar with early Velvet Underground, that's the kind of sound they kind of made.
hmm
And that's what influenced this. And it is
yeah,
really
yeah,
interesting, as you say, it's really something of itself.
and that makes sense because like there's this drone slash sludge. There's a genre called like sludge metal,
Yeah.
and while it's heavier and all of that, it's the same constant sound from the instrument. Now, it changes with a chord or a note, but there's always resonance to sustain the sound of the guitar, which is, exactly. I mean, that's pretty much spot on. So yeah, droning is a perfect way to describe it. So as the song progresses through the second half, the guitar continues to push forward, and slowly they begin to play with, again, I use this term loosely and non in a non-conventional way, but melodies and strum patterns are another thing that they use to like kind of add some variance. And it's really fun, but subtle. And I kept finding myself pressing one can harder against either ear in any moment to see what I could pick up and discern. But it was so filled with texture and thickness that I really, really enjoyed it. It was like the thickest, purest honey, but in a auditory form. Um, After riding that for a couple of minutes that do honestly fly by, the song finally comes to an end. One that I didn't imagine coming, honestly, as the song felt so open ended. Like that whole ending 2 minutes with 3 minute, whatever it is, could have gone on to the 7-10 minute mark with enough added variance in
Yeah.
all the thickness that they could have played with that seemingly forever. And I would have continued to have not noticed or felt like it was a shorter span of time than it actually would have been, because it all just kind of gets in your head and settles in. And you're kind of like, you ever see those parasites that like take over a bug and they
Yeah.
occupy a corpse of like a wasp for like X amount of hours or days after it's postmortem? That was like the song has that effect on you. Again, not to continue these insectual or animal kind of like comparisons, but it does have that way of just boring into your skull and comfortably residing there. At least that's the way it worked for me. To the point where I was totally taken aback when I like happened to move the cursor over and see that there was like 20 seconds left, and that all that time had gone by. I'm like, this could have been for another 3 minutes, and you could have told me that only 3 minutes had passed. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, really, really interesting. I wonder, is this like indicative of their own sound, or was this them playing with another sound that is one of many tricks that they draw from their hat? Because I know nothing about the Clean. I hadn't even heard of them until you brought them to the channel.
No, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I'd just say, of course they double track this. I'm being stupid, yeah. But if there were, this is beginnings and basic, and I'll go into why and you'll understand, what I'm talking about. This is, really early in their career, and it's really early as well. But this song is one of my favorite songs. And it's from a band that are pretty important in terms of overall the musical landscape that we now know and love. And a movement. So I'm going to introduce you to a genre or subgenre, if you want to call it. It's a geographical genre that at the time was pretty important, and it created a phrase which we now know today as indie rock. So let's get into it. And there's a bit of interesting stuff here to indulge me. So the Clean was a New Zealand indie rock band formed in Dunedin in 1978.
Wow.
They have been described as the most influential band to come from the Flying Nun label, which recorded many artists associated with the Dunedin sound, a musical and cultural movement in New Zealand in the early 80s. It helped found indie rock as a genre,
Mm,
with the Clean being one of the first bands ever to be described as indie rock.
wow.
Um, so just to go into this a bit, because it's quite interesting, the Dunedin sound can be traced back to the emergence of punk rock as a musical influence on New Zealand in the late 70s. Um, Isolated from the main punk scene in Auckland, um, and I was talking to my mate who's been to New Zealand. He has family over there, and he did say Dunedin is like arse end of nowhere, and there's nothing around. So you're a self-contained little bubble. So the main scene in Auckland, is influenced by bands like Buzzcocks. So Dunedin sort of got their own sort of strand, as it were. It's like your Madagascar with all the different sort of animals separate to Africa. So they had punk bands like The Enemy and The Same. These are more thus, which later developed into another band called The Chills. They developed this sound that is more heavily influenced by artists like Velvet Underground and the Stooges, compared to the sort of the Capital listening to punk coming in from America and from Britain, Buzzcocks, etc.
Mhm.
So yeah, this was complemented by this. And we've been over this before, but you can actually see it forming. So it was complemented Velvet Underground, Stooges, jangly psychedelic guitar music reminiscent of Beatles and the Byrds, and it comes together and they create this sound known as the Dunedin sound. And Flying Nun Records was the one, and they actually posted an EP called the Dunedin Sound, which had like 4 tracks from 4 bands on it. So many artists gained a dedicate. Again, this is really interesting, the whole movement. So many artists from Flying Nun record label gained a dedicated like college music following both at home and overseas. And in July 2009, Uncut magazine suggested that before the MP3 replaced the flexi disc, the 3 axes of international indie pop underground were Olympia in Washington State, Glasgow, and Dunedin.
Wow.
And the growth of the Dunedin sound coincided with the founding of student radio. Radio One, it was called in the university there. Commercial radio stations in New Zealand barely featured any homegrown music until a voluntary code was introduced in 2002. So all that time they didn't play any New Zealand music. Um, and the development of like parallel musical trends like Paisley Underground in California and the resurgence of jangle pop contributed to the sort of the growth and popularity of the Dunedin sound in college radio in the States and in Europe. Pavement, REM, Yola Tango, Mudhoney all cite the Dunedin sound as an influence. And post 2000, there's a new batch of Australian bands, often referred to as Dole Wave, and they're all heavily influenced by the Dunedin sound.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of background for you onto what's going on. So
Yeah,
brothers Hamish and David Kilgore formed the band, influenced by 60s pop and garage rock, punk, and psychedelia. They started off. They had like several sort of member changes and stuff. So they started off releasing singles and EPs, and then split and didn't record their debut album called Vehicle until 1989, releasing it the following year. And in total, they've released 5 studio albums, 2 live albums, 3 compilations, 5 EPs, and 3 singles. So for this song, after switching personnel, and they even switched instruments as well as they went along, and they settled on David Kilgore on vocals and guitar, Hamish Kilgore on drums and vocals, and Robert Scott bass and vocals. And this song comes from their debut EP, Boodle Boodle Boodle, that thing there. Was released in November 1981. So really,
real quick, John, I just have to say, and I think we have to give credit as we do with every time this comes up, but hell of a lot of sound for a 3-piece. Yeah. So
yeah, and that's I mean, obviously, just thinking back to the song now, of course, there's like, but I mean, this is really early. This is 1981. This isn't a nascent sort of, record label. They've got no money at all.
Yeah.
And there's 3 of them. So the way they've managed to make that sound is quite incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it is considered one of the most important releases in the Dunedin sound genre. The EP reached number 5 in the New Zealand music charts. There wasn't a separate chart for EPs or anything like that. And it stayed in the top 20 for nearly 6 months. And that really was the reason the sort of revenue from that kept Flying Nun going.
Yeah.
And that made it then responsible for the label's continued survival and the start of its growth into New Zealand's most important independent label.
Yeah.
So several of the songs on this EP became sort of mainstays of the Cleans repertoire. Anything Could Happen is one of their particular trademark songs, and this one as well. Chris Knox, who co-produced the EP with Doug Hood, actually drew the EP's cover, which was based on a promotional photograph of the 3 band members sitting in a bathtub. I've got the photo, and I'll drop it in here. The copy I've got is a re-release, I think, for a record day, record store day a few years ago. I couldn't afford the original. I mean, fuck it, this mucho dinero, I think they say.
Imagine.
But with it comes a copy of the original cartoon booklet that came with the EP. It's charming and it's ramshackle and it's kind of like a fanzine type thing. It's all these little cartoons and drawings you can see. There's one, I mean, some of them are like photocopied and bits like that. There's some really shoddy stuff in here, which is great. But one of these, which I think you particularly like, this is called, I don't know if you can read that, Bass Players Through the Ages. I thought that would make you smile. Yeah, this one here, some of them refer to the song. So this is the cartoon about putting that thing somewhere else.
Okay.
Suitable sort of nonsense to it. And there's stuff in there for just really weird, cartoony shite. And stuff about the band and how you can write to them and all that stuff like that. It's just really funny, and it's got their address there, which obviously no longer exists. But it's just really, really cool. And again, it's all this sort of DIY sort of feel to it, which I absolutely adore.
Yeah.
And I think back in 81, if you're some hapless teenager in the arse end of nowhere on the southern island of New Zealand, that's the sort of thing that would keep you going for a few nights. It's yeah, awesome. So there you go.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
I'll get into the lyrics, which, as you say, you know, they're there.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly.
barely. Baby, when you say you want me, I'll faint and know it's not true. I know when you hold me, you won't see it through. Don't point me out of the crowd. Don't point that thing at me. Going uptown as fast as I can go, going down and don't feel low. Going out all around, up and down to the speed freak sound. Baby, when you say you want me, I'll faint and know it's not true. I know when you hold me, you won't see it through. Don't point me out of the crowd. Don't point that thing at me. So perhaps he's talking about a camera.
That's funny.
Anyway, so just to continue, in 1982, the band recorded and released their second EP, which had the rather catchy title of Great Sounds Great, Good Sounds Good, So So Sounds So So, Bad Sounds Bad, Rotten Sounds Rotten EP. Um, Bizarrely, with a catchy
A
title
full
like that,
spectrum.
yeah, it reached number 4 in the New Zealand charts as the highest charted release. On the back of that, they supported a certain British band who came over in 1982 for their tour of New Zealand. They were called The Fall.
Oh,
Um, and then they released a single after that called Getting Older in October 82. Following Getting Older single release, and for most of the 80s, the Clean were effectively disbanded. They just didn't do anything. Band members went off and did other projects and stuff. Most notably, Robert Scott formed the Percy Tywin Band, um, which then renamed themselves the Bats and are another important Dunedin Sound band that are fantastic. The band reunited in 1988, opening for the Bats twice in London. Then they released their debut album after forming in 1978, their debut album in 1990, called Vehicle. And then during the 90s, the Clean continued to tour internationally and they released studio albums, Modern Rock in 94 and Known Country in 96. In 2003, there was a 2 disc compilation just called Anthology, which I don't know, it's got like 70 songs on it or something. And it
hmm.
really awakened new interest in the band, particularly in the US. And it sort of built on that international reputation and endorsements from really prominent 90s indie groups such as Pavement, Yola Tango. So they then released further albums, Getaway in 2001, which I think members of Yola Tango actually played on a couple of
Oh,
tracks,
that's
and
cool.
Mr. Pop in 2009. They're decent albums, actually. Hamish Gilgore, unfortunately, his death was announced in December 2022. Days after his family had reported him missing, he was last seen at a shopping centre. And then 6 days later, he was found and pronounced dead. He was 65 years old. No cause of death has ever been revealed. They just kept it under wraps. So no idea what happened. We can
Yeah.
speculate, but it's pretty unfair on them or the family. But you know, he died unfortunately, so that's effectively the end of the band. And the co-producer of the first stuff, Doug Hood, he died of cancer in September this year, so just last month. So yeah, that's the Clean. Really interesting band, really cool sound. I love this track, particularly because of the Velvet Underground sort of connotations to it. It's
Mhm.
just got that trancey, drony guitar that, as you say, it's almost like you're holding a jewel and just turning a light going through different facets. It's
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
changes are that sort of subtle.
Yeah.
But it keeps your interest, my interest anyway, and that sort of trance nature. You said, I don't particularly see myself being taken over by a parasite ant, but yeah, it definitely does put me into a trance of some sort. um, so yeah, interesting stuff. Really cool. I have got a couple of other Dunedin sound bands lined up, and one in particular is an awesome, almost anthem, which yeah, I'm gonna bung your way at some point in the near future.
Cool. All right. Well, I look forward to it.
Excellent. Right, wrap things up. Thanks for listening to this, Andy.
Thank you.
Um, Folks out there, what do you think? Well, there's an easy way to let us know. Hit that like button and drop some comments and tell us what you think. Other people may be familiar. I know sort of 2 or 3, 4 of their albums and bits and pieces and the anthology as well. So probably got most of it. But yeah, love to hear from your take on it. what do you make of this track? The band themselves and other stuff, and any other memories of the Dunedin sound. And you can probably guess the band's one in particular, which I'm gonna sort of shove Andy's way. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We always love hearing your comments. And for those who haven't subscribed already, please do. And we really appreciate everybody who supports the channel, helping us move onwards and upwards. That being said, thanks again so much for watching. And we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.